America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker with the Job Creators Network. And today we are joined by Bruce De Torres. He is actually joining us again. He's been on before. He is the author of God, School, 9/11, and JFK, The Lies That Are Killing Us and the Truth That Sets Us Free. He's also the communications director for the American Small Business League and the host of the podcast Reality with Bruce Torres. We're going to be talking about the state of the U.S. economy, the challenges facing Main Street entrepreneurs, and whether the growing conflict in Iran is already affecting small businesses across the country. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and to talk to you today.
Well, I love talking to fellow podcasters because we talk all day long. We're consuming as much as we can. But you and I kind of talk the same language in terms of our viewpoint is, how does this affect small businesses? And so I'm just curious broadly, what is your observation about challenges for small businesses and how they're doing right now?
Well, how they're doing right now is kind of dead in the water. Any given day, I get feeds that give optimistic news by a 0.5 percentage point or 1.2 percentage point, or I see downturns of a whopping percentage point or two in terms of confidence. I do know that there's consistent concern about the cost of goods and services, the cost of doing business, of finding decent labor. There were much fewer jobs created last year than is typical for America, which bodes really, really poorly for the economy. I think consumer confidence is the greatest indicator of how, but that's at the kind of talking head level, on the street level. My family, your family, and our friends, it's paycheck to paycheck. Unless we're in that rarefied air of the tippy top 10 or 5% of the income earners, it's paycheck to paycheck. It's just as brutal to keep a small business if you launch one alive for the first year. And I was really delighted to meet the man who created my organization, the American Small Business League, about 3 years ago. I'm setting a nice table here, Elaine. You're going to like this. He educated me the extent to which we are, beginning and end, top to bottom and throughout the middle, nothing but a small business nation. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses by the federal government's general definition of up to 500 employees. It shouldn't be that big, because 98% of all businesses in America have only up to 100 employees. That's 36 million businesses. And there's only about 36,000 businesses that can be called big businesses compared to that. So
500 employees is a pretty big company. I agree with you on that definition of what is a small business. If you're working in a company that's got 300, 400, 500 people, it's a pretty big company.
Absolutely. It should not by any measure be called a small business. Not when the average company has 6 or 7 employees. 2/3 of all of our small businesses have no employees. They're just the owner operator. And the average business, if you average out all the numbers, has about 20 employees. So who cares what the definition is? We do, because what we do is track Are the federal contracts that are supposed to be going to small businesses like we are told every year that they are? No, they're not. It's a hidden kind of scandal for the last many, many decades. And the problem is, Elaine, and then I won't just hog the mic here. The problem is, this is just to get my mission out of the way, ASBL.com. The problem is billions of dollars in federal contracts every year are given to big businesses, but reported as going to small businesses. So the SBA wipes their hands. They say, we met the goal. They don't create any new jobs with that work. They're already big, whereas legitimate small businesses, Elaine, would create a couple of million jobs on top of the million or so jobs America typically creates. It would be a tax-free, debt-free, deficit-neutral economic boom if we could just get the light of honesty shone on this and get a brave congressman or senator to look into it, pass new legislation, and that's the drum we are pounding.
So, do you find that it is in specific industries where these federal contracts are going to, we'll call them the big small businesses, I guess is the best definition to give them right now, the bigger of the small businesses? Do you find it specific industries or you're finding it across the board?
I haven't looked at a nuance. My educated guess is it's in the bigger industries. But the opportunity, I almost said problem, the opportunity is that the requirement is that 23% of all federal contract dollars must go to small businesses. And 32 million of our small businesses are in the industry codes that the federal government buys from. And the federal government is the world's largest purchaser of goods and services. Our small businesses sell what the federal government buys. And our investigations, our legal victories, congressional investigations, and other looks into this have shown that rather than the 23 or 25% we're told every year of contracts went to small businesses, it could be as little as 3 or 4% of those federal contract dollars actually reach legitimate small businesses. It's a ripoff of major proportions.
So whenever I'm talking about big business versus small business, and I talk about how regulations disproportionately impact small businesses because they don't have floors of lawyers and accountants to help them deal with the regulations, do you think that some of the challenges are the cumbersome paperwork and requirements to even become a contractor and win those contracts for small businesses, that it's just too much? Whereas the bigger small businesses, they do have, at least a general counsel, if not a small legal department. If you've got 500 people, you have a legal department inside of some size, even if it's just one lawyer. Somebody's inside looking out for you.
Yes, and I heard two aspects of it. The regulatory burden, yes, is much worse on small businesses because of the hassle, the time, the expense. Then you mentioned the contracting. Yes, it's not easy to learn first. There are federal contracts I could apply for, nor is it easy to determine how to do it and then to get easily or fairly considered. And that's because of decades of momentum of the purchasing agents at the agencies have a revolving door with many of the big companies, and it's a lock. There's a momentum of how it all gets, and even covered up, we accuse. So yes, here's another example of how big businesses have the power, the influence, the ear, the pockets, the hearts and souls of Washington, D.C. versus small businesses, and big businesses being 0.1% of all the businesses in America. The Commerce Department basically represents the interests of big businesses. I think it's got a $10 billion or so budget. The Small Business Administration represents the interests of small businesses. 99.9% of all businesses in America. Budget cut, less than $1 billion, down to about $500 million, maybe around $600 million. Demonized for mishandling loans. Or we're going to shut some offices because they're not implementing our ICE policies. It's the most blatant demonstration of that federal government it doesn't work for you and me and the small businesses at all.
So the SBA had its budget cut.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So they're
Yes.
down to under $1 billion in a budget as far as the budget goes.
Yes, with the new Trump administration last year, cutting staff. Oh, and also it's been proposed that shrinking the Department of Education, it might be a good idea to burden the tiny little SBA with the $1.7 trillion student loan portfolio while it's being accused of mismanaging $600 million in loans. Being set up to fail, just get rid of the SBA and say, we'll push all of its functions into the nice, big, strong Commerce Department or Treasury Department. And Elaine, we fear, lost in the fog of bureaucracy, will be this contracting plank, leg, arm function of the SBA. You say SBA, you know what most people think and say? Loans. Oh, they give you loans. They help you get loans. They back your loans. What about federal contracts? Excuse me? Federal contracts?
So does the SBA actually do the federal contracts? Do they do that too for small businesses?
They oversee compliance by the many federal agencies. Those agencies report to the SBA that they have met their requirement to steer X amount of their contracts that they disperse to small businesses. It's generally 23%. Some agencies it's a little lower, some agencies it's a little higher. But because of loopholes, bad policies, and flat out fraud, every year the SBA concludes it all and tells the American people, we surpassed the goal. The federal government gave 25% of contract dollars this year to small businesses. How about a loan?
Well, I have never thought that the federal government should be in the business of loan making, not for student loans and not for business loans. I just don't think that's what they should be in the business of doing. There's a lot of things that the federal government does. I don't think loans are something that it should be doing.
I know where you're coming from, but I'm excited to just take 45 seconds to describe something usually unheard of. However, Trade Representative Greer, and I think others in Davos in the last few weeks, mentioned Alexander Hamilton's American School of Economics. Everyone needs to read about it because it were the policies that reigned during our periods of greatest economic and manufacturing expansion. There's an author, Nancy Spanhaus, last name Spannnaus, Nancy, book, Hamilton versus Wall Street. Okay, the basics of the American system of economics. Tariffs to encourage domestic manufacturing, and also easily available credit for productive enterprises, for the entrepreneurs in the industries to create the manufacturing, to create what a country needs to manufacture to sell and create prosperity and trade within its own borders. So whether it's, again, government policies can definitely implement, foster, and support that kind of credit. Whether a government is directly in the business of loaning or not, that's when I'll call up the economist on the phone and say, how do the details work? But it's absolutely the most hidden and valuable history that I've ever heard of.
So I hear your frustration on the contracts, and I wasn't aware that it was so difficult for the actual Main Street small businesses to get these contracts. But I could see that just in the analogy I gave you on the regulations, that it makes sense to me. So what do you think the solution is? And I before you answer that, my family used to own a Goodyear tire store. We were a Goodyear dealership, and we lived in South Florida on the East Coast. And when the hurricanes came through in 2004 or five, I think Bush was president then. They came through our town. They were about 3 weeks apart, and they walloped Florida twice. We did an SBA loan, and I mean, the paperwork was, this tall. And I just thought, how do I even begin? And so there were resources to go meet with at the local college. I think they were SCORE, part of the SCORE program, former
Yeah.
CEOs, who helped me fill out the paperwork correctly. So, is it do we start utilizing some sort of training program to support small businesses getting through the paperwork? Because you and I both know it's about the paperwork, it's about filling it out the right way, and that's what he told me when I filled out the paperwork with them. There's a right way to fill it out, so that you don't miss a T or an I or anything like that. Because if you do, it's on someone's desk who is going home at 5 o'clock. And if you're going to make it harder for them, guess what?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen for you. So is it a training program? Is it an additional service there so that there's a better outreach to the small business community?
Those would all help. Those would certainly help. And those would follow a raising awareness of it.
Hmm.
So a conversation like this is invaluable. The information on my website is invaluable just to challenge people. Look into this. Get interested enough to start a conversation about it.
Hmm.
We have to do those simple, gentle things as busy citizens trying to make ends meet before we would get to the extreme of writing our congressperson, calling the senator's office, getting active to turn this around. But when enough of us do, we have to hope it's still possible. We can't despair. You can't fight City Hall. We have to rouse ourselves to try. And when enough of us try, we are in the business of trying to inspire people to do that with the glorious image of this year, of the midterms, getting this into the conversation among all the candidates and say, first of all, is this true? Go to our website, check it out. Go to
What
our,
is your website?
it's asbl.com for the American Small Business League. And we're soon to better organize our documentation, but it tells the story for decades of what I just said in the broad strokes about the reality of the situation. And do all you can to raise awareness of it so that the good folks at SCORE will simplify how to do that paperwork. But then if legislation gets passed, if we get a champion or two in Congress or the Senate or the ear of someone at the SBA who brings it to Administrator Loeffler's attention, or the economic people in the White House bring it to President Trump's attention, this is so compelling that if President Trump, would just say one word of it in a decently covered speech, it could cascade through Congress. Isn't it easy to hope or fantasize? My God, Congress would love to take something and score a victory quickly in the current chaos of the problems and the disappointments and the upsets and the horrors of what Congress is dealing with 24/7.
Hmm. My thought is, um, do they actually realize that small businesses, or the true small businesses, are kind of shut out of this, probably from a lack of awareness that these types of contracts exist, but also the difficulty in the paperwork and the application process. So when they're getting these applications, these are companies that have the infrastructure to support it, and go through the process. I mean, these are lengthy. If you've ever done any kind of application with the federal government, it's like giving your right arm up.
It's a combination of a number of them being ignorant, a number of them being very, very happy having their careers funded by donations from giant corporate and lobbyist interests, from being detached from their constituents. And I'm sure people in Congress for decades have had long careers and retired, and no one ever said anything to them about, hey, you know that small business contracts are being diverted to big businesses. It's a massive challenge to just get this known.
Absolutely. I think it's an important issue to raise, for sure. Um, So our listeners can go to asbl.com and find out some information about that. Well, let's talk generally about um, entrepreneurship in general. I mean, we've got a administration that's been in a little over a year. There was a pretty big hole to dig out of in terms of inflation and the regulatory nightmare that was out there. I mean, we had $2 trillion in regulations from the Biden administration. And I know that we had a good January jobs number come in, which is probably one of the better numbers. Although all of the jobs that came in last year were private sector jobs. And I think that's important. The numbers may not have been as high as we wanted, but they were of private sector instead of the government sector. And under the Biden administration, such a large percentage of jobs being created during those 4 years were government jobs, which really don't lead to a strong GDP. Really don't lead to. It's not sustainable to just keep hiring government workers. And so I think we've seen 300 plus thousand government jobs cut. The private sector is hiring. We had a good January number. Tomorrow we're going to get the February number. Hopefully it's more private sector jobs. But I feel like the stage was set in 2025 with some of those moves to see a very solid 2026. So what are your overall thoughts there?
That's the impression I get too from the vast majority of feeds that I get and also the things that I look at and look for and click into. I get the same impression, but through a number of sources that I'm impressed with, they forecast huge caution, if not warnings, of how fragile our economic strength is. Anyone just has to contemplate the debt, has to contemplate the uncertainty of trade in our economy and energy prices now under the shadow of war. We have to be prepared every day for some horrible news that is the falling off the cliff, and then that's a bumpy ride and a bumpy fall that we take for years and years, maybe. God forbid, I don't mean to be a doom caster here. Hey, for all I know, Iran, Israel, and the United States will have peace talks in a week or two, and prices will go up for 4 or 5 weeks, and then it'll all stabilize and everything will be rosy. I don't know. But the smart money says our unsustainable debt as a nation is a bubble poised for the popping by the most evil technocratic oligarchs who have developed and have waiting in the wings to impose upon us digital programmable currency. And then we are in an entirely new age of humanity with the type of surveillance and totalitarian control that will make George Orwell's 1984 look like The Wizard of Oz. And that's not even a great comparison, but you get my point.
Gotcha. Well, not being a doomsdayer, since you prefaced it there, what do you see for 2026 when it comes to small businesses? What do you see on the horizon for them? You've got the tax cuts, inflation is down, wages are growing. There's a lot of good things out there. So what is sort of your prediction for 2026?
All right. Since you asked nicely, I'll give a prediction. I'm not comfortable doing that, but it's a fair request. Probably just more of the same, crawling along. If I had this, but what I'm concerned about are the overhanging dangers and the risks to our stability, economic, politically, socially. These are really, really perilous times. There's There have been world concerns about cascading conflicts that could cause a World War III in the years leading up to this week. Now, those kind of sober and well researched and reasoned viewpoints say every day it doesn't escalate is a good day. I mean, there are literally mushroom clouds around the corner if this goes as sideways as things have in the past. And Elaine, I'm one of those who's done so much history who can show you and tell you the titles of the books, or at least the publisher where you can get them, that shows World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, Vietnam, Oklahoma City, 9/11, the assassination of President Kennedy, and the War on Terror I'm too close to the mic, were created by the same money powers in charge of our politicians and institutions today here in the UK and in Israel. And it would be nothing, just nothing for them to balloon into World War III, choking the world with a famine in many, many regions because they regularly let rise and then decimate the world's populations for their sick games of making money and watching the world burn and watching the blood flow.
Well, on that note, if you could deliver one message to the policymakers in Washington on how they can protect small businesses, what would that be?
The one single most impactful way to protect small businesses is to study everything we've been talking about this whole conversation and make sure that small business contracts only go to small businesses. Millions of jobs would get created. The whole economy would rise. Every hairdresser and garage door fixer listening who says, Bruce, I don't care about contracts. I'm never going to apply for a contract. I say, wait, you do, because you may not ever apply for a federal contract, but those businesses around you that do, and win them and hire all those new people, they all need haircuts. They all need their garage doors fixed. They all need their gutters cleaned. And their kids all need ballet lessons.
That's a great point. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Again, listeners, if you want to check out some of the information that Bruce has been talking about with regards to small business and federal contracts, you can go to their website at asbl.com, and that's the American Small Business League. And if you're interested in picking up his book, he's the author of God, School, 9/11, and JFK, The Lies That Are Killing Us and the Truth That Sets Us Free. Bruce, I also want to thank you for joining us again on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.